Okay, we should take about 45 to 50
Yeah,
minutes.
it's
Okay,
45.
and then you, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start.
Yes.
Right, so I have my team has received funding from Oral Health, but they don't influence the content of this talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just want to acknowledge all the various team members. Research of this level of complexity and sophistication could not be accomplished without them. And so you'll hear their names mentioned during the talk, but this is part of the entire team that has contributed to this. I also dedicate this talk to anyone who is really interested in optimizing health, well-being, and performance. Okay, because this is what motivated all this work. All right, and I just want to begin by giving a bit of a technology and market overview. Consumer sleep trackers have been in existence since around 2009 on scale, but it's only in the last 3 to 5 years they've really shifted from being viewed as gadgets to serious contenders in the public health and sleep medicine space. And accompanying this comment are many recent reviews underscoring this transition and its significance, right? There is also, together with this interest in trackers, a growth in interest in sleep as a modifiable health risk factor, which has captured significant media attention. So the Japanese government actually has come up with new recommendations about sleep that are more realistic to Asia. I looked at Nikkei Asia recently and found an article that should be of interest to you in Korea as well. Okay, because we are countries in East Asia that actually sleep very short, right? So anyway, I will give an overview of why I think consumer sleep technology and the ecosystems will transform the way we approach sleep and sleep health. Okay, and you are already along that journey already. So I'm speaking to the converted in a sense, yeah. Now, multi-channel EEG it's still the reference technology for sleep measurement, but it's been in existence for over a century now. The technical advances have been in miniaturizing hardware, improving signal quality. These are very mature already. Okay? So the new thing in that area is automated sleep scoring, and that's broken new ground. But the basic approach to data collection and interpretation has been stable for several years already, right? Now, the deployment of EEG for sleep assessment, however, is largely confined to the clinic or the lab because of how resource intensive the traditional implementation of this platform is, right? So it's not practical for scale. It's got a startup cost, and it's not good for longitudinal data collection unless you have got millions of dollars and lots of talented staff serving you. So actigraphy, which has been around for about 50 years, measures motion and as a proxy for sleep. And then it overcame the scalability and field deployment constraints of polysomnography or PSG. But again, it's been mainly confined to expert users, right? So Fitbit burst on the scene in about 2009, right? So riding a wave of interest in health gadgetry and promotion of fitness, right? Now, what's changed in the last years is that there's been addition of multiple sensors, convenient data collection, bundled with cloud storage, and then a lot of metrics which fulfill users' aspirations, and all this has taken place in a very compressed timeline and opened the door for many new users. Okay, so a lot of new users. Now, in today's talk, right, I classify the CSTs or consumer sleep technologies into three main groupings. The largest and most significant category, right, is the non-EEG wearables, right? So this can be divided into the well-validated and the mass market devices. This is very important because the average consumer, maybe your parents or your friends, will say, look, why do I want to pay like $200 or $300 for a Fitbit or an Aura when I can get a no brand thing for like $20 or less, right?
Yeah.
Why? They look the same. So I'm going to share with you some points as to why they are different. They're not the same. So the first thing is the EEG trackers. Now, these are they are available, but they are not really available also. They are mainly prosumer devices, um, and they're sold in very niche markets. So even the companies don't actually market beyond their home territories. I mean, there are Japanese groups, there are Chinese groups, and there's US groups that market their own. But probably the most famous one is the Dream, which is now it's a very good device, and you'll see some data later, but it's more now it's out of reach because there's like a 50,000 US dollar entry for players. You can't buy individual devices and use that data. So these are the most accurate systems. At least the Dream is, and then these vary in their accuracy. I won't get into the details because that's not the remit of my talk today. Instead, I'll spend most of my time talking about the data you can get from non-EEG wearable sleep trackers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, they are high and low cost items. They superficially look the same, except maybe the ring form factor devices that are more common now. But they differ significantly in their price, their performance, and/or functionality, and people need to pay attention to that.
Yes.
Then there are the nearable sleep trackers. Now, these are more suited for the people who are maybe not listening to this talk in hospital use or people who don't move around from night to night, right? So these aren't worn. They are placed somewhere near the person in the sleeping environment. So they harness either movement generated by electrical signals using ballistocardiographic signatures or pulse radio waves, like, for example, with the Somnify, to derive the requisite physiological signals for sleep inference. Okay. Now, the annual revenue growth for digital fitness devices has been very steady. I mean, it's better than the growth of any economy, right? In the 6% range. And this attracts very clever people to develop new tools and applications. And this is why I think that it's already happening now, but this is going to be more so in the coming years. It's going to transform health totally. Now, regardless of what we think now, sleep scientists or specialists need to stay humble because sleep is not the most important reason why the average consumer buys a health tracker, right? Most people buy a health tracker because they want to look good, they want to look fit, they want to impress their friends, right? So sleep is only like number 4, number 5. Only less than 20% of people buying a tracker currently, at least in the US, show interest in sleep as a variable or something that they want to monitor. But that's again changing. The other thing we need to pay attention to is that, Jay, you do a very important science, very sophisticated science, but actually your opinion is rarely heard by consumers, right? So the influencers have a much greater influence on sleep beliefs than sleep scientists, right? So these are the things that most of our friends who are not scientists go and read, right? And they say, yeah, I read in CNET, I read in whatever hardwarezone.com, about what is the best thing. They don't really know about what, how accurate the device is. In fact, a study done in the US where they just surveyed people who would answer through MTurk. This is Sleep Hirsch's work. It's now published. They found that the number one or the number 2 thing that people are concerned with is sleep depth, right? And if you are a sleep scientist, you know that actually this is not totally unimportant, but you can't really change this, right? I mean, people say you can, but you can't really change it. So what you can change is your sleep, when you sleep and whether you sleep regularly or not. And then limb movement, they don't think is very important, but actually this is the most important signal for measuring sleep, right? Now, the corresponding response from experts on the right panel here, is slightly different, right? And thankfully so. So, they put sleep depth lower. But a greater convergence of interest, right? For example, for sleep regularity is very important for sleep to have greater influence on health and well-being. Okay, so we need to align the 2 different columns of interest better. Now, why I think there's such a great future in the wearables is that you look at the explosive growth of smartphones versus standalone cameras, right? So This is the graph showing that, when I think most of you are quite young. So, well, at least when I was growing up, it was quite a big thing to own a camera. Not many people own a camera. And if you had a DSLR, that's you're very wealthy, right? But that started changing in the late 90s, right? And then smartphones appeared. When digital cameras first appeared, people say, this is not, I'm a serious photographer, don't mess around, this is a toy. But look at this plot, okay? So you guys are mathematical. So the plot here, so see how far it grows, So that whole thing is just here, and this is 2013. Now in 2022, it's beyond my plot range, right? Now, and you can look at the photographs, right? So which one was shot by a smartphone and which one was shot by a DSLR, right? So Jay, which one?
Maybe right side is smartphone. It looks
Well,
better.
yeah, it looks better. So I mean, you already say that the smartphone is better than the DSLR, which costs like 5 times more, but it's true, right? So this is not a naked image from a single frame, of course. It's it's frame average. There's a lot of signal processing going into there. And that's because a lot of computation has gone into the processing of that image, right?
Yes.
So you can say it's artificial, but it represents also it represents a form of reality that people want to value, right? But it's taken effort, and if some of that brain trust enrolled to improve image quality could be deployed for sleep science or medicine, then we can see lots of new things, right? So the takeaway one is the consumer sleep tech, right? A lot of sleep medicine people say, oh yeah, this is just a toy, I can't trust it. This is here to stay, so let's learn how to ride the wave, right? Now I'm just going to say, because most of you are not in physiology or health sciences. So what is the physiological basis for wearable sleep tracking, right? So wearables, they evaluate a set of physiological features generated from, subcortical or brainstem outputs, right? So they are distinct from the thalamocortical influences that underlie EEG signals, right? But it is the same brain state and the same brain we are surveying, okay? Although with different tools. Now, EEG-based sleep assessment has decades of history. So, all the analytic tools, as I said, are all mature. On the other hand, we are only beginning to harness the power of autonomic signals combined with behavioral markers to better understand sleep. And the fact that we can do it at scale and over time adds two added dimensions to why wearables are going to have greater impact than EEG over a long time. So motion is the most important marker, heart rate variability, temperature, and for nearables, respiration, enter into models of how to classify wake and sleep, and then run sleep staging. Typically, it's done in two steps. You do sleep wake differentiation. Then once the system thinks you're asleep, then it does staging. But that may change with time.
Yes.
So this is the several physiological changes and the sequence that occurs at different sleep stages. Okay. Now the basis for measurement, the physiological basis is known, but the type of sensor, where they are placed, how consistent the measures are in the field, not in the lab, and the algorithms used help differentiate the different devices. Okay. Then there is a user factor as well. So this is my sister, and she's wearing the phone, the smartwatch very loosely, right? So why this is important is that when you do this, the PPG signal that's important for determining heart rate variability is not going to be very good. And then you're not going to get good classification performance as a result. So how you wear the device is very important. Actually, even whether you wear the device, some people just wear a sleep tracker when they are 5 minutes before they fall asleep. So the device doesn't collect the prior information to inform it about certain important things that are used to tell about sleep. So that's not a good way to use the device either. Now, analysis of motion is by far the most important contributor to sleep-wake detection. Okay. The next most common variable used is heart rate variability, And here we see a sampling of the multiple works about this. Okay. Now, in terms of what are relative contributors to the classification, the thing is with the different manufacturers, they have different algorithms, they have different prioritizations. Now, this is one that came out from Aura, and it's their prioritization, but I think it represents reality, although the exact mixture could be different for different manufacturers. So motion detection itself does a good job with wake-sleep classification, right? The big jump in ability to detect deep sleep and REM occurs when you can see this big jump from here to here, occurs when you add heart rate variability into the staging model, right? So temperature, you see it adds something, but it's not very much. And when you combine everything, then it becomes, including a circadian model, then you can see the final accuracy is optimized. So takeaway number 2 is that the sensor technology in these devices is well-founded, well-established, well-tested, but the quality of the implementation matters, okay? And this is related to the next question, right? So are they accurate enough, for a serious user to use, okay? And for who? So there have been a lot of validation studies in the last 5 years. Now, this indicates a growing interest in the deployment of consumer sleep tech by healthcare professionals, okay? There exist several frameworks for evaluating CSTs, okay? So this is one that's published by Zambotti recently. So the frameworks exist, they are very carefully thought through, but the challenge is for scientists and clinicians to obtain the resources to test multiple devices properly under different conditions. This is because the manufacturers, especially the low-cost ones, the OEMs, they don't really care about whether the thing is accurate as long as they make as long as they can sell the devices, at least for the moment. There's no accountability because there's no regulation of these devices. But I hope that walking through some of these tests, I will make some points about the positive qualities of CST as well as their limitations.
I see.
So this is a blunt Altman plot, and this is all of it informs how biased the measurements from the device are in comparison to the reference technology, which is the PSG.
I see.
Now you can also gauge how this bias, which the bias is along this way, how the bias changes along lower and higher values of that measure. So higher values, lower values that measure. Then you can see, this proportional bias. And here, the slope is a proportional bias. Then about 30 minutes is about a reference measurement. Is generally accepted as a good standard. So this is the green bar. So across different sleep durations, right? So how much is the bias? So this one, as the sleep duration is shorter, the bias is a bit higher, right? But overall, if your sleep duration is quite good, you can find that the measurements are within 30 minutes of the deviation from the reference instrument, right? So the black dots here mark the participants with higher sleep efficiency. They generally have better sleep duration compared to the blue dots, right? So if you have lower sleep efficiency, you tend to be out of the ideal range. So this is why we say that generally most of these devices are good if you are relatively healthy or relatively healthy. If you are hospital patient, you can use the devices, but then the accuracy, just be aware that they are, there's a drop, right? And this works across all different devices as well. Now, the inaccuracies in sleep measurements, right, mostly arise from the ability to detect wake once you have fallen asleep, but you are lying very still. So these are two-stage histograms, two-stage only comparing, this is the reference, the PPG, the PSG, and then this is brand A, brand B, and then the actigraph, right, which is motion-only detection.
I see.
You can see that for sleep detection, it's pretty good. You can detect when a person is falling asleep. Now, there is detection of falling asleep is very good if there's a big change in movement. For example, you're walking around, then you sit in bed and then you fall asleep, right? So this is very easy. and this is okay for healthy persons. Now, if you have a long time, you take a long time to fall asleep, then there could be a problem there.
I see.
Right. Now, a quick fix you can have for detection. Now, notice that this this is the activity, right? So people are just active and then they stop active and then they go to bed and fall asleep. So it's easy to pick up. Now, the active graph usually doesn't pick up this, automatically detect sleep. You have to press a button to indicate sleep. It doesn't usually do this well. So the current systems will have some variability in their detection of bedtime because most people are too lazy to go and press a button to indicate when they intend to sleep. Okay. But the companies do vary in their automated bedtime detection. But the problem is during when you wake up and you lie very still, right? So here, brand A is very good at detecting the fact that you're awake, but brand B, because you're motionless, it thinks you're asleep, right? And the actigraphy thinks you're asleep. So these are correctly identified wake periods. But there are times also you can see in red that the wake is misclassified as sleep. So this is the weakness of the lower grade or lower quality consumer sleep trackers. So this example, we tested different devices. So this is the reference system, the PSG. This is the EG headband, the best, prosumer device, the Dream. And then Aura, Fitbit, and then 2 OEM devices. You can see that in a good sleeper with very good sleep efficiency. So the wake is green. So there are not many green parts. So this person is a person who spends most of the time asleep, has different stages of sleep marked by these different colors. And you can see that the EG headband is almost identical, but the sleep trackers, the good ones, are pretty good. The hypnograms are quite concordant with the reference devices, right? But the lower quality, the cheap OEM device, you can see it's it's not detecting properly, right? And the actigraph, the research actigraph, it's also not as good as the high-end consumer sleep trackers. So this is a person who had during the mid-sleep woke up a few times. So you see the EG headband is very good at detecting, but the consumer sleep trackers sometimes get it right? Sometimes get it right, but at other times they're misclassifying the sleep. So this is where, when the person's awake but motionless, these devices that don't actually measure EEG have challenges. All right, and this is my own record. This is a night where, I took a while to fall asleep, but the Aura did very well, almost like the Dream, which is the near reference. But on another night over here, you can see that, okay, I fell asleep well, but then I woke up early in the morning. I stayed awake. I stayed very still in bed, but the Aura failed here because it thought I was asleep, even though I was awake. Right. So there are nights when your sleep efficiency is lower that these devices are less accurate. Now, when you read reports about accuracy, now be careful of the word accuracy, okay? Because the way it's computed, right, through through sleep plus true wake over total epochs, even an inferior device, even a mediocre device will score in the 90% because of the way it's calculated. Because most of the time, when in a healthy person, you are in bed, you are asleep. So there's bias there's a prior bias in the measure, right? So accuracy and specificity are just, and sensitivity are, they are not sensitive to the problem where you can be awake but still, right? So for that, you pay attention to specificity or kappa, and this is how you can compute them. You can look this up later. These are more discerning metrics, and they are pretty decent in leading CSTs compared to a research actigraph as default settings. You see, so the leading CSTs are pretty good, compared to the EEG-based system, but the actigraph alone, no. So if you listen to my talks, at least for now, I try to downplay four-stage sleep classification for reasons I'll share later. Because I don't think if you're really interested in sleep staging, you should go for for a EEG based system, but still they do pretty good. You can see in the confusion matrices, you look along the diagonals, the numbers are pretty high. But if you're, like I said, if you're really interested in EEG, just go for the real signal, right? But the low cost device, you can see the performance. You look at the numbers on the diagonal, they're inferior compared to the blue products.
I see.
Now, aging is very important. We all age, right? So it does erode the classification performance, right, of any CST. But this also happens with actigraphy, and it also happens with PSG. So sleep measurement is less accurate in older adults overall, right? So whether it's actigraphy, EEG, or PS, or CSTs, the accuracy does decrease because the sleep efficiency declines with age. The other area which is still emergent is naps, right? So nap detection is an evolving feature. Most Westerners, unlike Asians, they think that people in nap are lazy people, right? So they generally they downplay the importance of naps as a part of sleep. So there's not much priority to build this up. Now, I'm not going to talk about the technical difficulties about detecting naps, but I will say that the different systems vary in their ability to do this, right? To pick up naps. So Aura can pick up naps of 15 minutes or longer quite well. Fitbit requires a little bit more time, and some of the other devices like Garmin and Samsung actually vary in their quality, and we've tested all of them. Now, I think some of you are working in clinical populations, and the most common sleep problem is insomnia, right? Insomnia or difficulty falling asleep or maintaining sleep. So it's good to know that even in 2017, right, a consumer wearable could match the device of a research actigraph, which is then the standard non-EEG device to measure sleep. Could match research actigraphy when testing patients with insomnia in a laboratory, as well as in a field setting. And mind you, this was in 2017, and the technology has improved it over time. It's improved over time, right? Okay. All right. So rounding up this section, what constitutes a good enough device depends on the use case, right? So you don't need an atomic clock to tell time, but you need one for accurate GPS navigation, right? So across a sample, and we deliberately tested people with different age groups, we came up with 3 recommendations. If you're doing really high quality clinical research on people with, sleep disorders or sleep difficulties, or you're testing out a drug, then, either a full lab assessment or an EEG based wearable is something you go for. And we've tested the Dream. We think it's really good. And they have, performance metrics that look like this, okay? 2-stage and 4-stage. But if you're doing population health, you're looking at mostly healthy people. You want to look at sleep patterns. You want to advise about, say, jet lag or, circadian rhythm regularization. Then a high-end consumer sleep tracker like a Fitbit or an Aura is good to have. At present, I can't recommend the third group of low-cost OEM devices because their performance, speaks for themselves. But I hope that in future they would, like smartphone cameras, they will improve over time, and all groups would improve over time the performance, right? But I can't really recommend these if you are serious. Now, I have talked about 2-stage. I focus on 2-stage classification because you can collect a lot of data and you can make a lot of inferences about the different dimensions about sleep, right? And you can do this over multiple nights in many people, which you cannot do with PSG, and which you weren't able to do with actigraphy because the GUI and the user interface, etc., was just not optimal for consumer use, right? But you can do this with CSTs. The other thing is that a lot of people like to compete. They compare sleep scores, but I'm telling you that we talk about sleep depth, N3, very important, because the old people, demented people have less N3. But really, you know, how much N3 you get it doesn't relate to how well you feel after you wake up, right? Actually, how good you feel after you wake up is more dependent on REM, you know, REM sleep. So, you know, the sleep depth is important for health, but it doesn't contribute to how well you feel. Okay. Number one. Number two, I know there's a lot of people say, oh, N3 very important for memory consolidation, but when Cordy and Raj, you know, consolidated the data from multiple studies and looked at the correlation between the amount of N3 and the memory gain, you see that, whoa, you know, this is you know, it's no correlation there. Now, what is more important, I think, if you're interested in population health, is that you know, the social demographic and socioeconomic factors affect the data you get, right? So what this data from the ABCD study, which is on adolescents, the US, is saying is that if you are lower socioeconomic status, you're less well educated, your chance of dropping out, even in a 21-day data collection, is higher, right? The survival curve is inferior in people who are poorer and you know, not so well educated. The other concern is that there's also, you know, significant disparities in what we understand about global sleep patterns, right? So over 85% of all research on sleep is done by, you know, North America and European countries. And as you probably know, the sleep culture there is quite different. Maybe not in the US, but certainly Europe and Australia, New Zealand is quite different from that in East Asia. Okay, so we sleep a lot less irregularly and shorter later as well. So there needs to be better geographical coverage about this sleep pattern. So validated CSTs are accurate enough for assessment of a relatively healthy person's sleep. And I think, you know, if you have a good quality device, there's no argument here, right? The bigger issue is to gain a more representative and comprehensive understanding of sleep rhythm. So extending the use of the current sensors, there's two I'm going to talk about, but I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on the vascular stiffness index, right? So there are two things you can do. These are the current users. You can measure all these, but the new ones would be arterial stiffness and then blood pressure. Now, the PPG signal, the photoplethysmography signal, has a waveform that can inform about arterial stiffness. Okay, so what happens is why this is important. Why is arterial stiffness important? Because the elastic arteries, they cushion the impact of ventricular ejection of blood, helping cushion forces that could otherwise damage end organs like the kidney and the brain. So the elasticity also results in improved diastolic perfusion of organs like the heart. Okay? So as we age, our arteries stiffen. So you can see that this is a young person. The waveform is that you see the systolic peak, diachrotic notch, diastolic peak, and then downtrend. As you age, you see the diachrotic notch disappears. You have just one big slope here, right? Like looks like a bit of a inverted U, right? So this stiffness is generally not the marker that your health is not so good. Now, this work done by Jism Yilmaz, you know, basically tried to see if you can reproduce this in a PPG. All right. So what she did was, excuse me. She looked at the waveform at different stages of sleep, and you can see that N3, you have the most relaxed arteries, right? So you have a very clear diachrotic notch, less so when the person's awake. He also showed that there's an age effect. In older people, you don't see this sleep stage modulation of the arterial waveform. And when you compare across different individuals, what you see is that as people get older, right, this index of vascular stiffness, they become more stiff, right? So here larger is better, and older people, the measure is smaller. And here, larger is hinge is better, right? And it's less so here. So these are some of the measures that you can derive from the PPG waveform and how they are modulated by sleep stage. Okay. I will just skip this slide, because of time. But basically, Thomas Yeo used the same waveform, and we were able to infer blood pressure, systolic and diastolic with good mean absolute errors, right, with this algorithm. So takeaway number 4 is that watch out for novel uses of existing sensors because they are going to come and they're going to greatly expand the usefulness of CSTs in the health market.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that, of course, you're interested in, the benefits of large data sets. Now, when we know more about others, you also help individual people like ourselves know how to place, ourselves in the big picture. Are we healthier, less healthy than the average person in our country, in other countries, right? So as I mentioned earlier, what is great about CSTs is you can passively follow sleep over months. And you can't do that with PSG. It's more accurate for one night, but there's night-to-night variation in how we sleep. So, this is like the timing of sleep over weekdays and weekends, and it does change, across days and across the weekday and weekend. So there's also multiple dimensions to the sleep. The most important ones being regularity, efficiency, and timing, okay, in addition to duration. So this is becoming very important to pay attention to, and I think Jay, you've got some metrics to look at. The phase disturbance, that actually is a proxy for that regularity also. So there have been multiple studies, large epidemiological studies that have linked greater sleep variability to higher mortality. They have also evaluated sleep variability, but the trouble is that they've done so because of the limitations of the biobank data. They've only done so for about 5 days of actual data, right? So some studies don't even take into account the weekend, right? So the weekday variation when aggregating information. So I think it's the first cut, but it's not great. So we actually examine long-term data collected from our health promotion board studies and look at the timing data of about 576 persons, each person contributing about 220 nights of data. And we found that good estimates of TST or total sleep time variability required 5 to 6 nights if you want to infer about a week, and 11 to 18 nights if you want to make good inferences about monthly time windows, right? So more nights matter. The other thing is that missingness is often not random, right? Sometimes people, they know that you're monitoring them for a health study. If they have really bad night, they don't want to look bad, so they will just turn off the ring or they'll not transmit that data. So missingness is not random. But to do this deliberately, not collect data and such is difficult if you're monitoring for a long period. So collecting data for longer duration reduces the influence of missing nights and when situations where people deliberately avoid their sleep being measured, and that might be important for health. Here's a study that got the assessment of sleep variability correct. They measured it over 28 days, and what they found was that the increased odds of hypertension related to sleep variability were independent of the sleep duration quartile. So, so this shows that the variability has information value that's independent of duration, right? And they can do it convincingly because they had a lot of unlicensed data. So this is a study we published last year. I hope those of you know it a little bit, but not, just look it up. So we were interested in the relationships between sleep duration and timing, as well as regularity across the world. So we took the identified data from Aura, involving 220,000 users, 35 countries. Each person contributed an average of 240 nights of data, right? So what we did was we replicated previous findings that, in Asia, the weekday sleep duration is shorter, right? Shorter, and it's also starting later because you can see this is the start time and the end time. Start later, but the wait time is about more similar. So the end result is the duration is shorter. But despite the fact that the sleep was shorter, it was also less efficient and more variable, right? Now, normally, if you curtail sleep, it will become more efficient, right? Normally, also, if the variability should scale such that with shorter sleep, variability, the absolute standard deviation should be lower, but it's not so in Asians, right? This is so because I guess we are working anxious about work or what. So even when you sleep, it's short, it's not terribly efficient, and yeah, it's still variable, which is not very healthy, right? So why is this so? Why is the sleep variability a problem? Now, one thing that we found was that unlike the Europeans and people living in Australasia, right, the weekend sleep extension is you sleep longer on weekends. It's shorter in Asia than it is in Europe or Oceania, right? So, and this is different from social jet lag, right? Which I won't talk about. So the weekend sleep extension is less, so people are not making up so much on the weekends. So they have to do some catch-up sleep in the weekdays, right? So that's our thesis. And why this is so is because of, in our part of the world is work, right? Most of the people, the major obstacle to sleep is work or anxiety about finances and that kind of thing. So you can see that work hours quite different. We work a lot harder than the Europeans, a lot different. So we think that it's because of this short sleep, and then you need to catch up on short sleep. So you sleep longer the next day, and then the following day you have to work, so you sleep less, and that's why the variability is higher. So, the Westerners like to say that, it's latitude, that accounts for sleep duration differences because the Europeans are further north than the people in a lot of Asia. But that's not true because if you compare Japan or Korea, which are about the same latitude north of the equator, then Australia is south, you can see that there's Australia and say Korea, the sleep duration is very different. So it cannot be latitude, that's the reason, right? So we think it's work. We think it's work, and people should know that. We're making all the products for the Western world to use, and yeah, we work very hard. So takeaway 5 is that long enough data reveals how sleep varies across time, person, culture, and circumstance. I'm just going to talk a little bit about, maybe about another 7 minutes, the benefits of data integration, right? So right now I've talked about just collecting data from wearables. But if you have multiple modal data, you collect from electronic self-reports and phone interaction app, you have both data redundancy, and it garners additional sleep relevant information to enrich the value of device collected data, right? So the collection methods depicted here piggyback on the fact that smartphone is already used to utilize the sleep tracker. So why not collect additional information alongside? So, but to fully benefit from this, a mindset change is required, right? So instead of thinking of errors associated within individual channels of information, you need to think of how you can use the discrepant information also to inform about the sleep patterns, right? So how do you think about data integration? To illustrate this, Steinmaster originally collected data from university staff and students, right? The original intention was to test compliance and data agreement from 3 sources, right? The sleep tracker, an app that measures when and how you use your smartphone, and an EMA smart diary, right? And then you just looking at this, the agreement, there's over 80% compliance over 8 weeks, and good agreement on most nights on these channels, right? Most nights. But on 23% of the nights, there were discrepancies, right? Where one channel had more than 1 hour discrepancy in its sleep assessment compared to the other 2. Okay? So a minority of nights. But when analyzing discrepancies, which is what we thought was novel about this work, we found 3 different patterns, right? I'll just focus on the first one. Now, this exemplifies how shortcoming in wearable sleep assessment can be overcome by data from other streams, right? So the blue period shown here are the ones where at least 2 of the 3 channels agree, right? The gray bars indicate the intensity of the phone interaction, right? And then the blue lines indicate the when Aura detected wake up time. So Aura correctly detected wake up time in these 2 nights, but not here, right? The first night, sorry, but not the second 2 nights. because of the issue with the quiet motionless wake that I mentioned earlier. Now, so this is one cluster of people, and then if you create a raster plot of each person occupying one row, and each column is one night, right? You can see people do fall into specific groups. So the red group, predominantly the nights in these individuals are this type of night. In the green group, they're predominantly the second type of night, and similarly for the third night, right? So in other words, the pattern of discrepancy you have, when the sensors disagree is systematic. It's not random, and it informs us. So 80%, 83% of the red group, when they're actually students, and they have quite terrible sleep patterns, right? They sleep short, and they are wedded to their smartphones, right? Yep.
Okay.
Now then, I'm going to skip this slide. This is about using Wi-Fi to detect sleep, right, in the population. Right. I'm just going to do 2 more slides and we'll be done. So this one is of interest. Well-being is an important thing in our students. So Alyssa Ng from our group studied a sample of healthy but relatively sleep-restricted university students, right? So they had to, on their smartphone, rate their mood, motivation, and sleepiness twice a day. Then they wore an Aura sleep tracker for 2 to 6 weeks. And then she performed multi-level modeling on the different nights of data, right? And what she found with this multi-level modeling was that nights when sleep was longer than the participant's average. Okay, so participants' average. So this was individualized to that person's data. The nights where the sleep was longer than the participant's average, they were associated with better mood, lowest and higher motivation, and lower sleepiness in the morning when the person woke up. And then the benefits in mood and sleepiness persisted into the pre-bedtime evaluation. Now, the time lag analysis showed that these effects were constrained only to the day after the given night, right? But didn't apply to the previous day. So this shows that the effects are fairly restricted, and then a couple of devices have this readiness score, so it lends some credibility to the issuing of mental readiness score. Now, the greater intra-individual variability in sleep was assessed through multiple regression models. And what we found is that, as we showed earlier, higher intra-individual sleep variability, you have lower post-wake mood, and then also motivation. And finally, naps, which are not very well supported in the West, they do help with mood and sleepiness, right? And then the next day also reduce sleepiness, right? So they are helpful as well, right? Okay, so that's what you can get from thing. And the last thing I'm going to do in 1 more minute is the point here is that the integrating of tools can significantly enrich the sleep characterization and can inform us about mental health. Finally, an intervention study example. So this, yeah, we are good. Otherwise, if you are short of time, I'll just skip into the summary.
No. Please go ahead. It's okay. I think there was some unmute person, so I will mute it. Yeah. Please go ahead.
This is the last data slide I have. So we want to see like intervention, how whether it works, right? So with our health promotion board, we're observing sleep patterns in a cohort of working adults. We selected a group of short sleepers. Now we know these short sleepers because amongst these working adults, we have been monitoring them for about a year, at least a year prior, right? So we were able to go into the records. We picked up the people who had an average time in bed of less than 7 hours a night, and then asked them to participate in a study. They were split into 2 groups, control group and intervention groups. So with the intervention group, we told them that they had to do 1 or 2 things, very, very simple, right? So they either obtain 30 more minutes of bedtime than their usual, right? So if you slept 6 hours a night, you 6 hours time in bed, you just get 6 hours 30 and you meet the target, right? That, or you go to bed before midnight. So if you do either of these, then you get a little reward, a couple of health points. And this was tracked quite continuously. We gave them feedback within a few days, and then if they complied or fulfilled the requirement, then they would get some points which they could spend on, buying things that they which were healthy. And then the control group, they received some general health advice, but no sleep advice, right?
Oh, I see. You
And
really provide the real money for the reward.
yes, I mean it's not sense, but the money has been used for buying goods that are healthy. So you can't buy potato chips with it. You can buy like maybe fruit or something like that. Fruit, vegetables, or some healthy thing. Yeah. So there's real money involved. But despite this, you see the benefit only for here, separating the blue group and the red group only for the weeks 3 to 5, right? Out of the 10 weeks. Okay, so it's really quite discouraging. You see here, there's no difference, right? Either for longer time in bed or earlier bedtime, right? Earlier bedtime a bit longer and lasted. Yeah.
I see.
So this is because the usual society obstacles, right? You ask for, people all said, oh, we love this program, very, very good, very, very good, but we can't, we have work, we have family commitments, we need to exercise, whatever. And so they give also excuses that why, despite the fact we provide incentives, despite the fact we provide feedback, they still don't do a great job, right? And these are Singaporeans who are quite disciplined. So what this taught us is that incentives only transiently improve time in bed and bedtime outcomes, right? So work issues, family commitments, these are big societal, cultural issues. You need structural measures like, educating people about when to shut down, having maybe rules not to send email after work, to help people sleep better. It's not that they don't know about sleep. They just need some structural measures to help with sleep promotion. So takeaway number 7 is don't just measure sleep, work to transform it, find innovative ways to try to modulate sleep, right? And then the round-up slides, parting thoughts. I think you need to ask yourself, what is the use of the CST? I mean, do I want to do a very high quality research study or, just population health, or I just need to satisfy, people to just say, well, they need to mind their sleep. So the tracker you use will depend on the purpose, right? So differentiate different groups. Secondly, you need to educate consumers that not all trackers are the same. The $20 one and the $300 one, there's a reason for the price difference, right? The investment made in the R&D and the improvement of the product as well as the services different companies provide. Thirdly, consider novel uses of sensor data, which are going to greatly expand the envelope of the utility of these devices. Support and incorporate cross-modality data integration, and as data scientists, this is something that you guys can participate in tremendously. And this is more for the doctors, engage constructively with data scientists and engineers, because if you want to transform health, these are the people who are going to help you do it. And finally, and this is for more diverse audiences, examine cultural differences in sleep habits to understand what optimal sleep means for different communities, right? So if you are well off versus less advantaged versus in shift work, what optimal sleep means is has to be modified. And by thanking my staff, for supporting this, and it's also our collaborators from different parts of NUS and overseas as well.
Sure.
And funding agencies, and that's it. So happy to take a few questions.
Yes. Wow. Thanks so much. So let's thank the speaker first. Yes, it's our Q&A time. So please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. But before asking a question, please introduce yourself.